ticket at this price, he's selling it at that price, and cannot see what he has done wrong and why they're stopping it. The issue, which is just incredible, that somebody will actually go to court, but they have. The issue with the ticketing, really, is the fact that the unprecedented traffic was not in the planning when they were looking at that route, when they did the survey on that route. Was this, what we are having now, was not what was envisaged when they were doing the planning, during the planning stage. Permit me to give you some figures. That in January to December 2017, total passengers, yes, for that year, were 353,146. A year later, in 2018, January to December, was 732,016. But in January to June, 6 months, in 2019, we're already on 551,860. So it wasn't envisaged. So they thought that, you have different stations require different traffic, or have different traffic. So it was, the planners at the time thought, well, they just go and buy ticket and go. Did not expect the traffic. What has happened now is that because of this unprecedented traffic, now is looking at people going PPP, they're going they've gotten, RCRC has given the no objection certificate. It's currently with BPP to get its own no objection certificate, and then it goes to FEC for approval for it to be online. It's a pity that, because, it's just, it creates so much havoc. Yes, it creates so much havoc, and the distortion is just ridiculous. But also part of the delay, please correct me if I am wrong, is also this issue of the fact that they have to fence the whole station. There are so many other things they apparently has to come first before the ticketing. So, but obviously because of what has happened now, especially on that route, and near the end of the year, they're looking at, we really need to start this to bring all that commotion to an end. Yes. Also, a question was asked about mismanagement. Like I mentioned earlier, that one of the things that the ministry were looking at, and we would love to work with the National Assembly on, is for all of us to put our heads together to see the unbundling of the NRC, of the going forward from the experiences of the lessons we've learned from the past and others that we've seen. Right now, NRC is a regulatory system, is a regulatory body. It's also the one operating and managing. Would that make sense going forward? So we have to look at the act, look at what is the best system. Is it from NRC, we get 3 or 4 different agencies or bodies that will look at taking part? Is it that we're going to, like you said, is it that federal government is the one going to manage? Is it that we're going to look at creating a managing company? Who will be the managers? Is it going to be a PPP? These are things that we'll have to all work out. I'm hoping that we'll work with National Assembly and look at it. Then the question was asked, how much money have we borrowed thus far? And the figures I am having, please, again, I stand to be corrected, is about $1.72 billion. Yes, 1.72 billion. We borrowed 500 million for the Abuja-Kaduna. We borrowed about 1.2 billion for the construction, just for the construction of the Lagos-Ibadan. The one we're now looking at for the 840 kilometers, am I right? 840 kilometers is the Ibadan to Kano, which is the 5.5 billion. Yes, okay, Kano to Ibadan. Yes. Is Kano to Ibadan, not passing Ilorin. Yes, that one. Yes, yes. The Kano to Ibadan, not passing Ilorin, is 5.5 billion. Yes, dollars that we're looking at borrowing. And honestly, the issue is the counterpart funding. Our own 15% is always what is the issue. So it's not like somebody was saying the other day, we tend to over worry about how much debt, or people say, oh, we borrow some money, we have a deficit. If we look at all these other countries, you and I know, the deficit, the American deficit is high. Even China, I don't think anybody built a rail system that did not own debt. Debt is not a bad thing. is, like you said, is managing your debt and making sure that it, I am not an accountant. I see, it seems as if everybody from Kaduna is an accountant. I am not an accountant, but I'm here with my accountant, and he knows that debt is not a bad thing. You know, we need to borrow. It's not necessarily the size of the debt, it's how we manage our debt. The fellowship I am feeling from across there, it obviously makes my job a lot easier. And you're absolutely right. Even when we came for the joint sitting, we could see that the mood in the National Assembly, I think a lot of people misunderstand the National Assembly, especially on the executive side. A lot of people misunderstand National Assembly and what oversight function is really all about. People tend to think it's always, as seen sometimes, or the way it's portrayed as if it's antagonistic, whereas really it's just a way of the National Assembly parliamentarians asking us on this side, how can we make your work easier for you to deliver for the Nigerian people? And so we appreciate and are grateful for your comments and your assurances to us, and let me, on behalf of the ministry, also assure you that our doors will forever be open. We hope and pray to have closer interaction, because one group or one person certainly does not have all the knowledge or the wherewithal. We have to work together, and like you quite rightly said, when we discovered that we actually only recently started having functional rail system in a country where I mean, 2020, next year is when Vision 2020 is supposed to be completed. And if you look at the Vision 2020, we are nowhere near it. So we have a lot of work to do. Unfortunately, we're now looking at dealing with the rail at a period in time when things are extremely difficult in the country. We know how expensive rail is. And it's one of those things that we all have to put heads together to see how we can achieve it. Without having adequate transportation that covers the entire country, there is no way in hell that there can ever be any form of development, because we need to open it up from the north to the south, east to the west. It has to be opened up for us to create wealth. So we're in that situation where is which one comes first, the chicken or the egg? We need to have a rail. We don't have the money. We want to develop. We want to move away from the oil, our dependency on oil, but we don't have the infrastructure in which to do that. And that is why the President's administration, right from 2015, has always spent and put a lot of emphasis on infrastructure. And much as people have sometimes misunderstood that, to think that we need to spend more time or more money on human capital, what happens is which one comes first? So it's trying, with the little amount of money that we have, trying to think outside the box, how we're going to do it. Now, before I go in this, what we've done is looked at it and said, okay, like me, coming from the great state of Kwara, we don't have oil. Our train doesn't work. I'm not an engineer, neither do I necessarily have all the knowledge of rail. I thought, from what I've learned, I want to share with you. And in doing that, started with the history of the rail system in Nigeria. I think that will help you to understand where we were, what happened, and how and where the country, through our ministry, is trying to head to, and the difficulties that we have along the way. So with that being said, if you permit me to go ahead, I promise I won't take too much of your time, but I think you will find it very interesting if I just go through it quickly for you. So after all protocols, I will start on behalf of the distinguished senators. I'd like to, oh, sorry, I'm reading your speech. It's been a bit confused, sorry. Okay, this brief comprises of the following: a brief background on the Nigerian railway system, like I mentioned, the rehabilitation of the narrow gauge track, development of the new railway lines and procurement and rolling stock, and then the planned expansion. This is how we've broken it down. So I will start first with the history, which I think is the most critical thing for us to give us the background on what's going on. So the Nigerian rail system is over 120 years old, from 1898. So our rail system started way back in 1898. Its development started with the operation of the first 193 kilometers narrow gauge line from the city of Lagos to Ibadan in the southwest region. The existing narrow gauge railway network is of length of 3,505 kilometers, consisting of two main lines: south to north of the country, that is the Lagos-Kaduna on the western corridor, and the Port Harcourt-Maiduguri on the eastern corridor, with associated branch lines constructed in sprouts of activities between 1898 and 1964. Now, between 1962 and 1964, the operation of the narrow gauge railway recorded its peak when over 12 million passengers and 3 million tons of freight were transported per annum. A decline in the operation was experienced between 1967 and by 1984, the railway had become completely irrelevant to industries and transportation, due largely to the government divestment in its development and maintenance. So by that time, by the time we got to 1984, basically we could say the rail was already dead. Now, the challenges occasioned by the decline have not been completely overcome. These are inadequate funding to cover the operation and the maintenance cost, the lack of rolling stock, the poor infrastructure with large maintenance gap, aging workforce, and obsolete facilities. These are the problems that we still have today. Okay, so when they realized the challenges and demand for transportation engendered by rapid increase in population, the federal government in 2002 approved a 25-year railway strategic development plan. That plan included how to transform the Nigerian railway system from one of non-performing and debt-ridden to a dynamic player in the transport sector. Also to reduce progressively the burden of the railway sector on the federal budget by developing policies and regulations that encourage investment in the rail sector by the private sector. And also to introduce transport policies that promote the use of the rail sector. And then strengthen the railway's capacity through local sourcing of maintenance and construction materials, and by developing the national capacity in the rail technology. Now, to implement the plan, the federal government embarked on the following. It had an emergency rehabilitation of the existing rail system, and then restructuring the railway organization and the environment in which the rail was being operated, and then expanding the capacity of the existing system and modernizing it. So previous governments embarked on the rehabilitation of the existing narrow gauge from 2009 to 2013 through various contractors. This effort, however, did not achieve the intended result, as the projects were either poorly carried out, partly abandoned because they really just didn't have the money, and or awarded to incapable contractors. So the Nigerian narrow gauge railway network remains the only railway transport with considerable coverage over the entire country. Now, despite the inadequacies, it is the only railway that connects the major commercial centers in the southern and northern part of the country. Now, the immediate and concerted effort by the government to revive it will effectively resolve the problems of the port congestion of Apapa and Tinkan ports in Lagos. At present, Apapa port freight is over 19 million tons, while Tinkan freight is over 15 million. Now, to achieve a vibrant and functional narrow gauge railway network today, the federal government is negotiating the concession of the system with a view to bringing private funds for rehabilitation of its infrastructure and engineering ancillaries, provision of rolling stock, and management and operation. Please, it's important you note that these are those areas which is the infrastructure, the engineering ancillaries, the provision of rolling stock, and the management operations is how these are the main factors or areas that we need to look at. When I say we, I'm talking about all of us, to look at in order for us to have a working, effective railway system in the country. Now, this is with the aim and objective of expanding capacity and efficiency. Now, I'm sure you remember that at one point, if you remember that the GE, it was all over the press, the GE was going to come and do the rail. Unfortunately, I think they looked at it and decided, and they just went quiet, they just went cold. And we didn't hear anything from them again. So now we're looking at how to fund, through direct government funding and loans, or how to fund and upgrade the narrow gauge. So this is just to give you a scenario of where we were. Now, so in setting the priorities for the required railways expansion, the ministry focused on creating a transportation backbone that will support both trade and economic growth of the country, taking into account end-to-end logistics and supply chains, and taking full cognizance of the need as enshrined in the vision to unbundle the burden of rail development from the federal government budget. So the Ministry of Transport started conducting project development for new railway lines. These included the Abuja-Kaduna rail line, which has been completed, the ongoing Lagos-Ibadan rail line, the ongoing Ajaokuta-Warri rail line, the Ibadan to Kano rail line, which is planned to start soon, we hope, and the procurement of new rolling stock, the locomotives, the coaches, and the wagons. Now I'm sure most of you all have been on the Abuja-Kaduna segment. Now this was the first one because what happened is that initially when they now in 2006, it was supposed to be from Lagos all the way to Kano, but unfortunately, we didn't have enough money at that time. The country didn't have enough money, so it was segmented into 6. The federal government decided at the time to segment it, and then started off, and Abuja-Kaduna was one of the segments, and decided to start that one, and that one has been completed. It was said it was started in year 2011. It was awarded to CCECC. The total cost of the project was $1.04 billion, which was co-funded from the China Exim Bank of 500 million. The rest was funded by us. We have finished, it's been completed and is operational. I'm sure the Nigerian Railway Corporation will give you details of how much money we're generating, but let me just say that we get about 3,700 passengers. It's a very popular, for many reasons, obviously with the security aspect as well, and also the convenience and the cost of the ticket. We get over 3,700 passengers daily on that route, yes. And it is, I will not necessarily say we've broken even on operational cost on that particular route. So now, to deal with the current challenges, government has installed a dedicated power supply for that line, because again, that's another factor, it's electricity. And it's regularly pursuing the completion of protective fence and installation of security surveillance system to avoid interference and enable the train to gain its full operating capacity. Now, the second one is the Lagos-Ibadan with extension to Lagos Port Complex in Apapa. This is the one that is the second segment of the modernization route. It again has been given to CCECC, and the total cost of that project is $1.4 billion. In 2016, it was decided that the extension of the line to go straight into the port, yes, was at an added cost of $94 million. Thereby bringing the total cost of that project going from Apapa, Ebutemeta to Ibadan to $1.5 billion. The project we commenced with a groundbreaking by the Vice President on the 7th of March 2017. Now, I've included, I will not bore you with that, I've included the breakdown that was 85% of it was financed by the China Exim Bank, and the rest, the co-finance, the rest is coming from within our own coffers here. So the Nigerian, just to give you an example, you can see the federal government counterpart funding is $314 million just for that particular route. So it is believed that they will finish this rail by mid next year, so that should be in operation. Then we come to the last segment. So you see, initially there were 6 segments, and now decided that, you know what, the best thing is for us to do the Ibadan-Kano straight away rather than continue because of time. Like the chair said, well, like he said, what we all want to do is later on sit back in the future when we're talking to our great-grandchildren to say that we were part of something historic, and that we actually took part and played our own part in getting this project up and going. And therefore, it was decided to condense the other 4 into this one. So now it's going from Ibadan straight to Kano. This is the one that we're hoping will start next year. We're looking for money. We don't have, the federal government doesn't have the money, but it was decided that instead of breaking up, this will be a project as a double track rail from Ibadan to Kano, which is 820 kilometers. And then there'll be a single track branch from Osogbo to Ado-Ekiti. Now, the president said, look, if we're going to embark on this, it's important that the rail, we shouldn't just go with the track that the colonials left with us many years ago. Nigeria has grown, we have new capitals. It's important that the train system goes through at least each state. So you will see that that is why some are double track and some are single, in order to ensure that we at least have a rail system that goes through each and every capital of the state. So that's why there's a branch line from Osogbo to Ado-Ekiti. That one, so the total for that whole project is from Ibadan to Kano is $8.3 billion. Yeah. So, Nexim Bank, we're looking at 85%. Will finance 85% of the direct cost, which amounts to about $6.7 billion, and that the federal government will pay the counterpart funding of $1.6 billion. Now, the Itakpe Ajaokuta, as you know, the Itakpe Ajaokuta was completed in 32 years ago, in 1987, after it was first conceived in 1987. So the progress of 80% have been achieved on stations, tank farms, workshops, and yard building along the line. It is believed that there will be a train service from next month. Commenced. I'm talking about the Ibadan, Lagos-Ibadan is next month. So, and I'm eager to get onto that one. So, okay, so the work comprises of construction of 12 stations, completion of locomotive and rolling stock workshop, office, clinics, power stations, rehabilitation of the railway village. We believe that this one will satisfy the demand for the transportation, the mining and mineral producing sector, to contribute to the diversification of the economy. It has a total length of 576.27 kilometers, single track, standard gauge rail from Warri Port to Abuja via Itakpe and Baro. Also, it will support the extra capacity needed in the two ports in Lagos by diverting freight to Warri, thereby reducing cost of the demurrage and attendant transfer cost. So hopefully we'll save a lot of money and come to the reduction of cargo in cost to the end user. So what has happened, well, for this one, we had to look for the funds. And this time, the ministry has signed an engineering procurement construction contract with CRCCI, because this one is actually going to be a PPP, yes.